Dr. Sarah Chen's footsteps echoed through the crystalline corridors of the Galactic Sporting Federation headquarters on Europa Prime. The structure, carved from the moon's ice and reinforced with alien metals, seemed designed to make humans feel small. Perhaps it was. The council chamber doors parted with a soft hiss of pressurized air. 7 beings waited within, each representing a different evolutionary path life had taken across the galaxy. The Lumini delegate floated as a sphere of pure energy, while the Silicon Collective's representative towered above in a crystalline form that refracted light into dazzling patterns. The chamber's environment shifted constantly, accommodating the diverse biological needs of its occupants. Dr. Chen, the Lumini delegate's thoughts translated directly into her mind. We have reviewed Earth's application for participation in the Galactic Games. The being's tone carried what Sarah could only interpret as condescension. We find ourselves concerned. Sarah straightened her spine, ignoring the way her muscles protested against Europa Prime's enhanced gravity. Humanity has met every published criterion for participation. We've achieved faster-than-light travel, established colonies beyond our solar system, and demonstrated significant athletic achievement within our biological parameters. The Silicon Collective's representative shifted, creating a symphony of chiming sounds. Your species lacks basic biological safeguards. Your calcium-based skeletal structure is primitive. Your oxygen dependency makes you vulnerable. Even now, you require an atmospheric supplement to survive this meeting. Sarah touched the small device at her throat that filtered the chamber's exotic atmosphere into something her lungs could process. With respect, the games were established to celebrate diversity in athletic achievement. Our differences. Your differences would get you killed, interrupted the methane lead delegate, its tentacles rippling with bioluminescent patterns. The photonic sprint alone would tear your primitive nervous system apart. We cannot allow a species to participate in events that would ensure their destruction. We've reviewed your planet's sporting events, the Lumini continued. Your Olympics demonstrate admirable achievement within your limitations, but the Galactic Games operate on a different scale entirely. Your fastest runners would appear stationary to many of our competitors. Your strongest athletes would be crushed by the basic gravitational requirements of most events. Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but her voice remained steady. Then let us prove ourselves in controlled conditions. Allow us to demonstrate. The Council's decision is final, the Silicon Collective representative chimed. Your species may reapply in 500 solar cycles, assuming you achieve significant evolutionary advancement by then. As Sarah turned to leave, she caught fragments of conversation between 2 crystalline beings near the chamber's exit, their translators still active. Never survived the Proxima trials. Amusing they even attempted to qualify. Barely more advanced than their primate ancestors. Sarah's hands clenched into fists, but she kept walking. They didn't understand. Nobody had expected humans to achieve faster-than-light travel either, but they had done it. Nobody had expected them to successfully colonize the Mars desert, but they had done that too. Every time humanity encountered a limitation, they engineered a solution. As she reached her ship in the docking bay, Sarah pulled out her communicator. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface as she composed a message to an old friend from her Special Forces days. They had written humanity off as too fragile, too primitive, too limited, but humanity's greatest strength had never been their body's raw capabilities. It had been their refusal to accept limitations. Jack, she wrote, remember that crazy idea we discussed about the underground sports circuit on the frontier worlds? I think it's time. Gather the others. The galaxy wants to see what humans can do. Let's show them exactly what they're missing. The message sent, Sarah looked back at the gleaming spires of the Federation headquarters. They thought they were protecting humanity by excluding them. Instead, they had just guaranteed the humans would do what they had always done best. Prove everyone wrong. The neon lights of New Shanghai's underground district painted the rain in shifting colors. Sarah watched from beneath a translucent umbrella as Jack Riley, her former Special Forces teammate, argued with a towering Crexar about entry fees for the night's competition. 200,000 credits. 3 days ago it was 50, Jack growled, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly in the dim light. The Crexar's scales rippled with amusement. Price went up when we saw your last performance on Titan. You humans are becoming entertainment. The alien emphasized the last word with a clicking of its mandibles. Sarah stepped forward, transferring the credits with a gesture. The Crexar's compound eyes reflected the confirmation hologram. We're not here for entertainment, she said quietly. We're here to compete. Inside the converted warehouse, the air hummed with the babble of a dozen alien languages. The space had been transformed into a three-dimensional obstacle course that wound through electromagnetic fields, gravity wells, and phases of matter that shouldn't exist in normal space. Diana Martinez, their ultra-marathoner, was already studying the course with intense focus. Her neural enhancers flickered as they processed the complex environmental data. They've added quantum uncertainty zones, she muttered, and those gravity wells are pulling at least 15 Gs. Good, Marcus Chen, no relation to Sarah, said as he stretched his augmented tendons. The Parker expert had modified his body specifically for these events, pushing the limits of what the human form could achieve. Means they're finally taking us seriously. The announcement system crackled to life, broadcasting in universal standard. Final call for the Proxima Challenge qualifiers. Competitors to their starting positions. Sarah watched her team take their places. 6 months of competing in these underground events had taught them valuable lessons, all paid for in blood and broken bones. But they were learning, adapting, doing things the alien competitors had never considered. The first phase began. Marcus launched himself into the gravity well, using its own force to slingshot through the course rather than fighting against it. Diana followed, her neural enhancers allowing her to predict the quantum fluctuations moments before they occurred. Jack brought up the rear, his military augments helping him coordinate the team's movements. From the observation deck, Sarah could hear the aliens placing bets, their translators struggling to keep up with the excited chatter. The humans were still considered underdogs, but they weren't being dismissed as easily as before. They're approaching the phase shift, a silicon-based being hummed next to her. No organic species has completed that section without. The being fell silent as Marcus hit the phase shift zone. Instead of trying to push through it like other competitors, he went completely limp. The team had discovered that the human body's natural electrical field could ride the phase waves if they stopped resisting them. Marcus flowed through the supposedly impassable barrier like water. Diana and Jack followed, using the same technique. The observation deck erupted in shocked whispers. The final stretch involved navigating a series of rapidly changing environmental conditions. Temperature swings that would shatter most species, radiation pulses that scrambled neural patterns, atmospheric shifts that could suffocate or crush. But this was where humans excelled. Their bodies, so often dismissed as primitive, could adapt to a wider range of conditions than any specialized species. Where others required environmental suits or biological shutdowns, humans pushed through. When Marcus crossed the finish line, followed seconds later by Diana and Jack, the warehouse fell silent. They had completed the course 3 minutes faster than the previous record, held by a cybernetically enhanced Drachnid. Sarah smiled as she transferred their winnings to a secure account. The team had just qualified for the Proxima Marathon itself, an event most species considered suicidal to even attempt. As they left the warehouse, Jack pulled up the latest statistics on his neural display. Federation's starting to notice. Underground betting systems are lit up with discussions about human capabilities. Good, Sarah said, watching New Shanghai's artificial aurora dance across the sky. Because we're just getting started. The Proxima Marathon is in 3 weeks, and I want the whole galaxy watching when we prove what humans can really do. The rain had stopped, but the neon lights still painted the streets in defiant colors, much like humanity itself, refusing to fade into the background of galactic society. The Federation Council chamber felt different this time. Sarah stood before the assembled delegates, but now their postures conveyed agitation rather than dismissal. The viral footage of human victories in the underground circuits played on floating displays throughout the chamber, focusing on their triumph at the Proxima Marathon, an event that had claimed the lives of 16 alien competitors in its history. Your unauthorized competitions mocked the sanctity of organized sporting events. The Lumini delegate pulsed with barely contained energy. You've turned sacred athletic traditions into spectacles. We turned nothing into spectacles, Sarah responded, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We simply proved that your assumptions about human capabilities were wrong. The Silicon Collective's representative chimed in discordant tones. By competing in unregulated events without proper safety protocols. The same safety protocols you used to exclude us, Jack interrupted from beside Sarah. He'd insisted on accompanying her this time, his cybernetic eye scanning the chamber continuously. Funny how those protocols only seem to apply to humans. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The Methane League representative's tentacles twisted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as discomfort. Perhaps we were hasty in our initial assessment. We propose a compromise, the Lumini delegate announced, its glow intensifying. 5 trials. Official Federation events, chosen by the Council. If your species can win 3 of these events against our champion-level competitors, you will be granted full Federation membership. Sarah felt the trap in these words. And you choose the events. Naturally. We must ensure proper challenge levels. The Silicon delegate's crystalline form sparkled with what might have been amusement. Jack stepped forward. Let me guess. You'll pick events that specifically target human biological limitations. Maximum gravity challenges, vacuum exposure trials, radiation endurance tests. You are free to decline. The Lumini delegate pulsed smugly. Sarah exchanged a glance with Jack. They both knew what this was. An attempt to humiliate humanity publicly, to prove the Federation's initial dismissal had been correct. The Council would choose events that seemed impossible for human physiology to survive, let alone compete in. We accept, Sarah declared, causing several delegates to shift in surprise. They hadn't expected that. But we have one condition. All events must be broadcast across all Federation networks. No closed trials, no private demonstrations. If you want to test humanity, you'll do it with the galaxy watching. The Council chambers erupted in overlapping translations as delegates conferred. Finally, the Lumini delegate pulsed in agreement. Accepted. The trials will begin in 3 standard months. That should give you adequate time to prepare your team. Assuming you still wish to proceed once you learn the events we selected. Sarah smiled, and she made sure it wasn't entirely friendly. Send us the details, and while you're choosing these impossible challenges, remember something. Every time in human history that someone has told us something was impossible, we've taken it as a challenge. You're not setting up our failure. You're motivating us to prove you wrong. Again. As they left the chamber, Jack pulled up preliminary data on his neural display. They're already announcing the first 2 events. The Jovian Gravity Well Challenge and the Photonic Speed Trial. Sarah, these are suicide runs. The Gravity Challenge alone operates at forces that should liquefy human organs. Sarah kept walking, her mind already racing through possibilities. Get me everything you can find on previous competitions. Full technical specifications, competitor biological data, victory conditions, and Jack. Contact Marcus and Diana. Tell them to drop whatever they're doing. We're going to need the whole team for this. The whole team. Sarah, what are you planning? She stopped at the chamber exit, looking back at the assembled delegates still discussing their decision. They think they're setting us up to fail spectacularly. Instead, they just gave us exactly what we needed. A chance to show the entire galaxy what humans are truly capable of. And the medical pod's soft blue light illuminated Diana's unconscious form as Sarah reviewed the latest training data, The ultramarathoners' vital signs had finally stabilized after 6 hours in the enhanced gravity chamber. They'd pushed to 14 Gs today. Not enough. The Jovian challenge would require at least 18. She'll recover, Dr. Paddle said, adjusting the pod's regeneration settings. The medical bay of their training facility on Mars had seen constant use these past weeks. But Sarah, these training intensities were walking a dangerous line. Before Sarah could respond, a crash echoed from the adjacent training room. She rushed in to find Marcus on his hands and knees, blood dripping from his nose. The holographic obstacles around him flickered, replaying his failed attempt at navigating the photonic speed course. Again, Marcus gasped, trying to stand. "Not today," Jack said, helping him up. "Your synapses need time to recover from the temporal displacement." Marcus shoved him away. "We don't have time. The trials start in 6 weeks, and I still can't maintain quantum coherence for more than 30 seconds. Sarah watched as Marcus's legs gave out, Jack catching him before he hit the floor. The former Parker expert had undergone experimental neural surgery last week, attempting to enhance his brain's ability to process faster-than-light movements. The procedure had nearly killed him. "Everyone's done for today," Sarah announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We need to review our approach." Later, in the facility's strategy room, Sarah studied the floating holograms of their competition. The alien athletes they'd face were biological marvels, beings evolved for extreme conditions that humans were never meant to survive. "We're going about this wrong," Jack said, manipulating the display to show their latest training results. "We can't beat them at their own game. Look at these numbers. The Jovian champion's natural state exists at 25 Gs. The photonic trial winner literally exists partially out of phase with normal spacetime." "Then we changed the game." Diana's voice came from the doorway. She stood unsteadily, having checked herself out of the medical pod early. "We're trying to match their adaptations, but that's not what makes humans special." Sarah turned to her. "Explain." "In the underground circuits, we won because we found unexpected solutions. We didn't try to overpower gravity wells. We used them as slingshots. We didn't fight phase shifts. We flowed with them." Marcus joined them, his cybernetic implants still glowing faintly as they healed. "She's right. We're approaching this like we need to become something we're not. But maybe our weakness is our strength." Sarah began to understand. Our bodies evolved to be adaptable rather than specialized. We're not the strongest or fastest, but we can change our approach instantly when something doesn't work. "Exactly," Diana said, pulling up footage from their Proxima Marathon victory. "Other species train to perfect their natural advantages. We train to overcome our natural limitations. That's what they don't understand about us." Jack's cybernetic eye whirred as he processed the implications. "So instead of trying to match their capabilities, we design entirely new ways to complete the challenges," Sarah finished. "Ways they'd never considered because their biological advantages made them unnecessary." The team worked through the night, redesigning their training protocols from the ground up. Instead of trying to withstand 18 Gs, they developed a technique to create 0 G pockets within the gravity well. Rather than matching photonic speeds, they found ways to predict and intercept movement patterns. 3 days later, Diana stood before the gravity chamber again. The medical pod had been modified into a mobile unit she would wear during the challenge. Marcus practiced his new approach to the speed trial, using gravitational lensing to bridge space rather than trying to move through it. They were still pushing their bodies to the limit, still risking everything. But now they were doing it the human way, not by becoming stronger than their opponents, but by becoming smarter, more innovative, more adaptable. Sarah watched her team train, each of them giving everything they had to this impossible challenge. The Federation thought they were setting humanity up for failure. Instead, they were about to learn why humans had survived and thrived on a planet that had tried to kill them countless times. They would win not because they were the best athletes, but because they were the best at finding ways to win. The stadium on Europa Prime fell silent as Marcus's body crashed against the containment field. The Jovian gravity well challenge had gone wrong in ways none of them had anticipated. Their carefully planned zero-G pocket technique had failed when the Federation adjusted the gravity parameters moments before the event began. Sarah watched from the competitor's box as medical drones rushed to extract Marcus from the well. His vital signs flickered on her neural display, stable, but too weak to continue. The Drachnid champion hadn't just won. They'd made it look effortless, their crystalline body actually gaining energy from the crushing gravitational forces. A valiant attempt. The Lumini commentator's voice echoed through the stadium. Though perhaps this demonstrates why the Council's initial concerns about human fragility were well-founded. Jack's cybernetic eye flared with anger. They changed the specifications. Our calculations were perfect for the original parameters. Prove it, Diana muttered, preparing for her own event. Without looking like we're making excuses, Sarah understood. The galaxy was watching. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds had tuned in to see humanity's attempt to prove themselves. Accusations of cheating would only reinforce the narrative that humans didn't belong here. The photonic speed trial began an hour later. Diana stood at the starting line, her modified racing suit incorporating elements of their underground circuit experience. The goal was simple: complete 3 laps of a track while moving at near-light speeds through quantum-shifted space. Their opponent, a being of pure energy named Textol, had won this event 6 times. As the signal to begin flashed across multiple dimensions, Diana activated their new strategy. Instead of trying to match Textol's natural ability to exist partially out of phase with normal space, she would use gravitational lensing to create shortcuts through the course itself. For the first lap, it seemed to work. Diana's suit bent space around her, creating micro-wormholes that let her keep pace with her opponent. But on the second lap, something changed. The quantum field stabilizers they counted on began to fluctuate. "The field harmonics," Jack said, checking his readings. "They're different from every previous race. They've altered the quantum substrate of the track itself." Sarah watched in horror as Diana's suit lost coherence. The gravitational lensing effect collapsed, leaving her to run at merely superhuman speeds against an opponent who existed in multiple time streams simultaneously. The race was over before the final lap began. In the medical bay afterward, Diana refused to meet anyone's eyes. "I let everyone down. All that training, all those innovations, and we looked like primitives playing with technology we barely understand." "That's exactly the narrative they want," Sarah said, her voice tight with controlled anger. 2 events, 2 very public failures. The galaxy is already calling for us to withdraw rather than face further humiliation. "Maybe they're right," Marcus said from his recovery pod. "Maybe we're not ready for this level of competition." Sarah looked at her team, broken, beaten, but not yet defeated. "They keep changing the rules because they're afraid. They saw what we did in the underground circuits. They know that if they give us a fair chance, we might actually win." "So what do we do?" Jack asked, his cybernetic implants still processing data from both failures, looking for patterns they might have missed. Sarah's expression hardened as she watched the Federation officials celebrating their victories outside. "We do what humanity has always done. We adapt. They think these defeats will break us. They don't understand what humans are really made of." She pulled up the specifications for the next event, the adaptive arena. "They've shown us their strategy. They'll keep changing the rules, keep moving the target. So we stop aiming for where the target is and start aiming for where it might be." "You want us to prepare for them to cheat," Diana said, beginning to understand. "I want us to prepare for everything," Sarah corrected. "They think they've drawn blood in the water. Let them think that, because they're about to learn what happens when you back humans into a corner." The galaxy wanted a show of humanity's limitations. Instead, they were about to witness humanity's greatest strength. the ability to turn failure into fuel for success. The adaptive arena resembled a massive kaleidoscope, its crystalline walls shifting and reforming as environmental conditions cycled through random patterns. Sarah watched the preparation screens as competitors dropped out during the preliminary readings alone. The Federation had cranked every variable to maximum intensity. "They're trying to make sure we fail again," Jack said, helping Diana adjust her new hybrid suit. They'd rebuilt their equipment from scratch after the previous defeats, incorporating lessons learned from both disasters. "No," Sarah replied, studying the arena's patterns. "They're trying to make sure we don't even attempt it. Look at these parameters. Atmospheric pressure variations from vacuum to gas giant levels. Temperature swings that could melt lead or freeze hydrogen. They want us to withdraw voluntarily." Marcus stepped forward, his injuries from the gravity well still evident in his slight limp. "Too bad we're not good at taking hints." The arena's first challenger, a metamorphic being from the Centauri systems, lasted 3 minutes before the rapid environmental shifts overwhelmed its adaptation capabilities. The second competitor, a quantum state entity, made it to 5 minutes before losing cohesion. Then it was humanity's turn. Diana entered first, her new suit designed not to resist the changes, but to flow with them. Marcus and Jack followed, their equipment linked in ways the Federation had never seen before. They moved as a unit, each compensating for the other's limitations. The first shift hit like a hammer, absolute vacuum. While other competitors had fought to maintain their preferred environment, the human team let their suits collapse to minimal configuration, using the vacuum itself to enhance their mobility. "Fascinating approach," the Lumini commentator mused, "though surely they cannot maintain." The environment shifted again, crushing pressure, hot enough to melt steel. Instead of fighting it, the team used the pressure differential from the previous vacuum state to generate power for their cooling systems. They weren't just surviving the changes. They were using each shift to prepare for the next. "Impossible," a Silicon judge chittered. "Their equipment cannot be compensating this quickly." But it wasn't just the equipment. Decades of living on a planet with multiple climates and seasons had engineered humanity for adaptation. Where specialized species saw each change as a crisis to overcome, humans treated them as opportunities to exploit. 7 minutes in, they passed the previous record. At 10 minutes, Diana's suit briefly malfunctioned under a radiation surge. Before the judges could call for extraction, Marcus and Jack had reconfigured their own systems to shield her, letting her repair her equipment on the fly. "This is not within standard protocols," the Lumini commentator protested. "Show me where the rules prohibit teamwork," Sarah countered from the control booth, her voice carrying across all broadcast channels. 12 minutes. The arena shifted to a crystalline structure that should have trapped them. The team responded by matching their vibration frequencies to the crystal itself, essentially becoming part of the structure before breaking free. At 15 minutes, they didn't just break the record, they shattered it. When the klaxon finally sounded to end the event, the stadium sat in stunned silence. The human team had doubled the previous record, and they were still going strong. "How?" the Silicon judge demanded. "Your species lacks the biological adaptations necessary for such performance." "You're right," Sarah responded, her voice carrying across the now silent arena. "We lack natural adaptations. That's exactly why we succeed. We never evolved to handle extreme conditions because we learned to adapt through intelligence and cooperation instead. Every environment you threw at us, humanity has already faced and overcome through innovation." She turned to address the cameras broadcasting across the galaxy. "You see our need for equipment as a weakness, but tools and technology aren't crutches. They're expressions of our greatest strength. We don't adapt our bodies to environments. We adapt environments to us, and we do it together." The scoring systems flickered as the judges argued, but the result was undeniable. Humanity had won their first event, and they'd done it in a way that demonstrated exactly why the Federation had been wrong about them. They hadn't just survived the impossible challenge. They'd made it look easy. The endurance labyrinth loomed before them, a twisting maze of challenges that stretched across multiple dimensions. Floating displays showed the dozens of alien competitors preparing for the 36-hour trial. After humanity's shocking victory in the adaptive arena, the stakes had risen dramatically. "They've modified the course again," Jack reported, his cybernetic eye scanning the shifting pathways. "Added temporal loops, gravity sinks, and is that a quantum uncertainty field?" Sarah studied the new additions. "They're not just trying to stop us now. They're trying to understand how we think, how we adapt." Our victory in the arena scared them. Diana checked her suit's reserves one final time. After their last success, the Federation had banned direct team assistance during events. Each competitor now had to face the challenges alone. "They still don't get it, do they? Forcing us to work separately doesn't make us stop being a team." The starting signal pulsed across multiple frequencies. Competitors surged forward, each taking different paths through the maze. The Federation champions, confident in their specialized evolutionary advantages, quickly took the lead. Hour 3. The first wave of competitors began to drop out. The constant environmental shifts and physical demands exceeded their endurance. The human team pressed on, their pace steady and measured. "Look at them," the Lumini commentator broadcasted. "So slow, so inefficient. Surely they must realize they're falling behind." Hour 6. The temporal loops started claiming victims. Species that could naturally manipulate time found themselves trapped in paradox cascades. But humans, used to experiencing time linearly, simply treated each loop as a new challenge rather than trying to bend physics to their will. The silicon judge's crystals chimed in confusion. They're not even attempting to solve the temporal equations. They're just going through them repeatedly. "That's because they're not trying to beat the loops," Sarah explained from the observation deck. "They're learning from them. Each iteration makes them more efficient." Hour 12. The quantum uncertainty fields took their toll. Competitors who had maintained perfect performance suddenly found their actions having unpredictable outcomes. The resulting chaos eliminated another third of the field. But the humans kept going. When uncertainty made their planned routes impossible, they improvised new ones. When standard tactics failed, they developed new approaches on the fly. Hour 18. The halfway point broke even the hardiest remaining competitors. Their specialized adaptations, pushed beyond natural limits, began to fail. A drachnid champion, whose crystalline form had seemed invincible, shattered under the accumulated stress. "Surely the humans must be reaching their limits as well," the commentator mused. "Their biological systems require rest, recovery." Hour 24. Diana stumbled in a gravity sink, but caught herself. Marcus's hands shook as he navigated a particularly complex temporal loop. Jack's cybernetics glowed hot with exertion, but they kept moving. "This is what humanity evolved for," Sarah broadcast across all channels. "Not specialized perfection, but sustained performance. Not bursts of excellence, but the ability to keep going when everything says stop." Hour 30. The last non-human competitor, a being of pure energy, finally dissipated under the strain. The Federation officials watched in disbelief as the humans continued their relentless progress. "They're suffering," the silicon judge observed. "Their biological signs show extreme stress." "Why don't they stop?" "Because this is what we do," Sarah replied. "Humanity didn't become the apex predator of Earth through strength or speed. We did it through persistence, through the ability to keep going long after other species had to rest." Hour 35. The human team, exhausted but unbroken, approached the final challenges. Their movements were no longer graceful, their techniques far from perfect. But they possessed something no other species in the competition had shown: the sheer, stubborn refusal to quit. When the final klaxon sounded, only humans remained on the course. They hadn't just survived the labyrinth. They had outlasted every specialized adaptation, every evolutionary advantage, every superior species. 2 victories, Diana gasped as medical drones assessed her condition. One more, and they have to accept us. Sarah watched the Federation officials huddled in urgent discussion. They'll make the final challenge even harder now. They're finally beginning to understand what they're dealing with. Good, Marcus managed a tired smile. Then they know what's coming. The galaxy had just witnessed something unprecedented, not the triumph of superior ability, but the victory of relentless determination. And humanity was far from finished. The multimodal challenge arena resembled a quantum computer's visualization, constantly shifting, impossibly complex, existing in multiple states simultaneously. The Federation had designed their ultimate test, combining elements from every previous event into a constantly evolving gauntlet. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Jack noted, scanning the course specifications. These parameters exceed everything in Federation records. They've created something entirely new just to stop us. Sarah watched the Federation officials preening in their private box. No, they created it to understand us. Every challenge is designed to test a different aspect of how humans overcome obstacles. The rules were deceptively simple. Complete all phases of the course, adapting to each new challenge as it appeared. No breaks, no repairs, no substitutions. Other species had already positioned their specialists around the course, ready to tag in for their optimal segments. Humanity would field the same team throughout. Remember, Sarah addressed her team one final time. They think specialization is the pinnacle of evolution. But Earth taught us differently. Adaptation isn't about being perfect for one environment. It's about being good enough for any environment. The starting signal pulsed across dimensional barriers. The first phase hit immediately. A gravity well combined with temporal displacement. The Drachnid specialist shot forward, its crystalline form perfectly evolved for these conditions. Diana matched its pace, using techniques learned from their earlier failure to ride the gravitational waves rather than fight them. Impressive recovery, the Lumini commentator admitted. But surely they cannot maintain. The phase shifted. Quantum uncertainty filled the arena, probability clouds making every movement a gamble. The energy being specialist took the lead, existing in multiple states simultaneously. But Marcus had learned from the labyrinth. He didn't try to master quantum uncertainty. He embraced it, using probability itself to carry him forward. Unorthodox, the Silicon judge chimed, yet oddly effective. Another shift. Atmospheric challenges that would require completely different biological adaptations. The Federation champions tagged out, bringing in environmental specialists. The human team simply adjusted their approach, their earlier failures having taught them how to turn hostile conditions into advantages. They're not excelling at any single phase, the Lumini observed. Yet they remain consistently competitive throughout. Sarah smiled. That's because you are still thinking in terms of specialization. Humans don't excel at individual challenges. We excel at change itself. The final phase combined everything: gravity, time, quantum mechanics, and environmental hazards all at once. The Federation champions scrambled to coordinate their specialists, each evolved for specific conditions, but struggling with the combination. The human team moved as one. Where Diana's endurance faltered, Marcus's agility compensated. When Marcus struggled with quantum effects, Jack's tactical experience found alternatives. They weren't the fastest, strongest, or most naturally suited to any single aspect, but they were adaptable in ways the specialized species couldn't comprehend. This isn't possible, the Silicon judge protested as the humans pulled ahead. Their species lacks the evolutionary adaptations necessary for these conditions. No, Sarah broadcast across all frequencies. We lack your specific adaptations, but we have something far more powerful: the ability to change, to learn, to overcome. Every failure taught us. Every setback made us stronger. Not because we evolved new abilities, but because we learned new ways to use what we already had. The final moments of the challenge unfolded across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Federation champions, each perfect in their specialty, found themselves outmaneuvered by competitors who were merely good at everything but great at adapting. When humanity crossed the finish line first, the silence in the arena was absolute. 3 victories, Sarah announced to the stunned Federation Council, against every specialized adaptation you could field. Not because we're superior, but because we refuse to accept limitations. The council chambers erupted in overlapping translations as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just earned their place in the Galactic Games, they had demonstrated an entirely different path of evolution, one that valued adaptability over specialization. Welcome to the Federation. The Lumini delegate finally pulsed, its tone carrying something new. Respect. Perhaps we have as much to learn from you as you have to learn from us. Sarah looked at her team, exhausted, triumphant, and already thinking about future challenges. That's another thing about humans, she smiled. We never stop learning. And we're just getting started. The galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented, not the victory of superior ability, but the triumph of humanity's greatest gift, the capacity to face the impossible and find a way through. Not because they were the best, but because they never stopped trying to be better.